So we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us for this training. I think we mentioned briefly yesterday, in the past we've put on these events and it's more speaking at you, and we've heard the appetite that we want to be having conversations with you. And so without further ado, I introduce you. Connor Reed is a political organizer and civic engagement professional with experience supporting candidate and community leaders interested in public service. His work focuses on helping individuals understand the practical realities of running for office, including campaign planning, messaging, and community outreach. So we are thrilled to have Connor from Country First Academy join us. And so I'll go ahead and hand it over. Thank you.
Before I let you go, Connor, I just wanted to tell everyone I'm super excited about this morning's what we're doing, particularly this. This is the first time we've ever done anything like this. And I mean, it's early in the morning on a Sunday, but I want to thank you for being here. I don't know if you're interested in running for office, but I hope that you do. Yes, that's right. We need everyone in this, let's just do it, right? That's how great things happen. And I mean, if you're here, you are exactly the type of person that we need running for office. So please take notes, ask questions. This is the most important session in my book. So thank you, Connor. We're excited to hear what you have to say, and I hope that there's just a bunch of principals firsters on the ballot in the next coming up election. So please, without further ado, we are excited to have you.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Heath, and thank you, Brittany, and the Principals First team for having us. I'm very excited to present to you the work that Country First has done for a couple of cycles now in educating pro-freedom, pro-democracy individuals to run for office. One of the things that people often miss in the process of civic engagement is that the information game is something that also has to be democratized. If we want more Principals First type people in office, we need to make sure that they have the tools, both technical and interpersonal, to go out on the campaign and succeed to the best of their ability. So Country First Academy was founded on that principle, that everyday Americans have answered the call to serve, whether they are teachers, whether they're police officers, they're medical professionals. They're folks who want to do well in their communities and do good for their communities. And so in terms of offering them an on-ramp to civic service from whatever their past life might have been, you don't have to be a teacher, or police officer, or doctor to engage with us. It's an opportunity to put country first, to put your principles first, get on the ballot, and understand what it means to run for office. Now, one of the things we'll talk about is fundraising. And there's a lot of people in the business community who have experienced fundraising with their venture platforms, but it's very different when you're running for office as well. And so there's going to be a couple of things we talk about today that you might have some experience with in your professional life, whether that be marketing, fundraising, finance, or volunteer mobilization if you're engaged at a civic level today. And I hope that you will find it useful, and we'll make sure to have some time for questions. So, to begin with some of the materials we have, Country First Academy has a 30-part resource library, which we call our learning library. There are 14 webinars, 14 templates, and 2 tech tools that cover the issues of running for office. So the 14 webinars range from compliance to messaging, fundraising, social media, grassroots outreach, grassroots game planning, if you have a voter file, how do you navigate it, and more to help you digest a full syllabus of assignments of what it takes to run for office. With that in mind, we actually do have a resource called the syllabus, just like you're in the classroom here at the Academy, and that is your list of public officials. The most common question I get is, what can I run for? And that's where people need sometimes the most help, especially if you're looking at the hyper-local level, because it's not always that easy to identify. So if you go to our website today, there's already all of your elected officials at the federal and state level, and in 25 of the 50 states, all your county level officials, including some special purpose board districts, are there as well. I come from a computer science background, so OpenAI was an opportunity for us to integrate the advent of artificial intelligence into our work. Hey Professor is an OpenAI-powered chatbot that answers your questions about running for office that has been trained on our educational materials. So if you're not on the phone with us, you can still engage in a more meaningful way because it has access to the brain that we have. Hopefully it doesn't take my job. So we'll start today with a little bit of an overview of what we'll talk about. There will be 5 parts. And the goal of this is to have you walk away with a true skill set, whether it just be awareness or enrichment of what it takes to run for office successfully, meaningfully, and to engage thoughtfully with your community. So the first one is the most important one. That's compliance, ballot access, and your first steps when you want to become a candidate. Nothing else matters with regards to your messaging, your fundraising, your social media, your field team, if you can't get your compliance and your administrative stuff in order. And the reason for that is because you can have so well-intentioned runs at office, but if you can't get your HR paperwork, that's what I call your nomination paperwork, in order, then your election authority will very well disqualify you. So we want to make sure that your foundation is strong in the fundamentals that will allow you to be a candidate legally, and so that way the fund can begin. The next part we'll focus on is social media, advertising, and messaging. Getting the word out is one thing, crafting it to your audience is another. Fundraising and budgeting, it's so much of running for office is raising a dollar, but also knowing how to wisely spend it is equally as important. Field team development. No campaign goes at it alone unless you're in a town of less than 100 people, which that doesn't apply to. You can't do everything by yourself. And for that reason, we'll talk about some of the most common roles on a campaign, what that looks like, and how to mobilize said individuals. Election day and leadership is also arguably the most important of these, because whether it's leading up to election day and it's your get out the vote, or once you win, or if you gracefully lose, what does it look like when you step into civic service? How do you serve your constituents? What does that have to look like from your perspective? Okay, so let's begin with part one, talking about compliance. The first thing you have to do, and this is less so compliance, but more about the thought process that goes into beginning the idea of running for office, and that's refining your why. So you have to clarify your personal motivations to run and your public purpose. There has to be a clear, definable message to your general audience, your electorate, as to why you're running, and it has to sound authentic. So for that reason, tie your life and your life stories to your run for office. Anecdotes are great, but the applicable skills that can translate is even better. Articulating a vision that voters can understand and trust is equally as important, because people have to know when they hear you that they're hearing someone who brings genuine appreciation for their community to their ears, and so that in their run for office, they know that there's a candidate who's serious about stepping into service. Candidates should assess time and financial commitments, because the most common issue that I see that disrupts a really well-intentioned campaign is the fact that folks underestimate how much time it takes to run for office. That's not a full-time job, mind you, and in many cases, the office you will serve is not a full-time job. There's only a couple of state legislatures that are even full-time jobs. But that doesn't negate the fact that your weekends are going to be densely populated on your schedule with campaign activities. If you have a family, this definitely factors into your decision because of responsibilities at home. And so for that reason, we encourage you to thoughtfully talk out with your family your intentions to run, your aspirations, so that way your fundamentals at home internally are great and taken care of before you step out into the arena, and then the pulls of a campaign are a strain on your time. Early preparation builds resilience, not just because of the fact that you want to make sure that you feel confident in everything that you would have to assess before a run for office, but also when creating a plan early, it allows you to adapt with flexibility to the variation in a campaign. And so for that reason, if you take care of the bedrock of your campaign early and taking care of your ballot access and your compliance, everything else, that can run on autopilot while everything else changes on the day-to-day. So the most important thing at the start of this is understanding that you have to form a committee. So there is an entity when you're running for office, and that is your campaign committee. Some places call it a principal campaign committee, and you have to go to your election authority and register with them to become an official candidate. So some places call this a statement of organization. Some places call this a declaration of candidacy. Some places call it a statement of interest if you're in a state like Arizona. And this is the process of going about and saying that there is a committee to elect John Smith, and that way you have an entity to receive donations, which comes into play when you need an EIN and a bank account. So when you register your candidacy and your committee promptly after deciding to run, you're giving yourself the longest legal runway to go out and run for office. There's a lot of restrictions in counties and states across the country about the political activity that is permitted before your committee is actually registered. In a lot of cases, the answer was none, outside of informal exploration and attending your partisan meetings. Early compliance security enables fundraising, spending, and voter outreach because of everything I've said so far with regards to making sure that everything is taken care of on the boring side of things so the fun can start and your campaign can take shape. The next step you have to do is you have to appoint a treasurer. In a lot of cases, you also might have to appoint an official chair or chairperson of your campaign. In many cases, that can be you or the treasurer themselves. Some states allow you to be the treasurer for your own campaign. We often suggest that it be another individual, so that way you can focus on the campaign while somebody else focuses on the financial obligations of that. There's going to be a lot running in your mind, whether it be events, whether it be knocking on doors or chasing donations, that you'll have to consider as a candidate. And so we don't want that to slip by the wayside when it comes to your financial obligations that can carry heavy penalties, especially if they're financial in nature. So when we talk about finance, there's a couple things we need to consider, and one of them is contribution limits. You can't donate an infinite amount to an elected official. There are some states that have much higher contribution limits than others when it comes to a campaign. The federal congressional campaign contribution limit is $3,500 per election, so we're talking $7,000 over the course of a year from an individual. But in a state like Tennessee, you're looking at less than $2,000 per cycle, so less than $4,000 over the course of a full year. And so for that reason, getting grounded in what the rules are for your specific election is very important. Don't assume it's a one-size-fits-all from either your state or the federal government, because elections are hyperlocal. Later, inaccurate filings can result in fines and reputational damage because sometimes those fines can be upwards of 30 to 40% of what you might need to raise in total when running for office. And so for that reason, making sure that things are on time, in order, and accurate is incredibly important. I talk about the separation of finances from a treasurer's perspective. The other thing you have to consider is the separation of finances from your own personal finances. The IRS is not going to allow you to commingle your personal bank account with that of your campaign, which is why you set up a committee to begin with. You need a separate entity to receive your donations. And so obtaining an EIN from the IRS as a 527 organization allows you to achieve that separation. And allows you to create a bank account with that and then maintain all your reporting through a direct channel that isn't factoring into your own personal budgeting, which makes things easier when it comes to your own tax time and also makes things easier when it comes to your legal obligations. Ballot access is a general umbrella term that deals with, as you may have guessed, getting on the ballot, but it takes a couple of steps in a couple of places to do that. Some require all of the above, some only one, some none, and it's you can if it's really hyperlocal, you can go and sign up. Think special purpose boards like soil and water conservation districts. You might only need a handful of signatures, whereas some places, if it's really small, you might be able to get on the ballot by registering, because in many of those races, there's times where there's no candidate who has filed. So your ballot access rules range in signature requirements by jurisdiction. If you're looking at the local level, think municipal, you're looking at 50 to 100 signatures. Once you get into the state legislative level, you're looking at a couple hundred, and Congress is when you approach the thousands. If you're running as a partisan candidate, those are typically your thresholds around there. If you're looking to run as an independent candidate, you can double it, because in a lot of places, they require you to get 2% of the overall population for your district. So, what we have to also consider is that you can pay for placement on the ballot in certain states, like in Minnesota, if you're running for state legislature, you can pay, I think it's like $500 to Oklahoma, you pay $500 to get on the ballot to run for state representative. These are called filing fees. Some of them are administrative in nature and required that are more like in the range of $25 to $100. But there are some states where it can be in lieu of collecting signatures, which if you're crunched for time, could be a reasonable avenue for you to get on the ballot if it's not prohibitively expensive, as long as you form your committee, get your EIN, apply it to a bank account, and make sure that your financial compliance is in order to receive that donation. When you're navigating the political landscape, and this is something that people at Country First and those at Principles First have to contend with often, especially if you find yourself at odds with your local political party, given the broader environment, is setting your North Star early to know what it is that will be your line in the sand, what also will it be that you set as your direction for your partisan activities. So some of these may include the structural requirements. So if you need to run in a primary, or you're going to go straight to the general election. If you have to run in a primary, making sure that you're contacting your local county party chair very early is going to be very important. If you're running as an independent campaign, it's also very important that you understand the parts of the electorate that might be swing type voters, which you can easily get modeled from a source like L2 or any other voter data resource, and we'll talk more about this later, that identifies voters and their habits, whether it be frequency and also their perceived allegiance to their party. When we talk about early relationship building, this is something that I often tell folks when you're determining your timeline in running for office, is it's incredibly important to start a little bit earlier than you think might be needed. If you want to run in 2028, I would begin laying the groundwork, so to speak, in the summer of 27. Now, what does that look like functionally? It means attending events. It means looking to connect with your local party, working on their voter outreach. Even if there's no big elections, if you're not in Virginia or New Jersey, and in 2027 you don't have your state legislature up, I believe Mississippi and Louisiana also have a few on rotation. There's going to be local offices that are going to be up. There might be school board, for example. So building up some goodwill with the partisan infrastructure that you have locally will be very important when it comes to running your campaign, and forging those relationships early on will allow you to be successful. Assembling your team. No campaign goes at it alone. So when we talk about your staff and volunteer base, this is largely dependent upon your budget. But your campaign manager might be someone who's also the treasurer and or your chief advisor for the campaign. Your field director is going to handle your volunteers. Your finance director handle your fundraising as well as your budgeting. And your communications director handling your outreach and your messaging. Okay, so let's talk about part 2, social media and messaging. So social media and the digital game is where campaigns are often won today. And so for that reason, you need to consider what megaphones you will use to amplify your voice when it comes to running for office. That would be Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, X, Blue Sky, Threads, YouTube, etc. You have to also make sure that you are coming up with a solid content calendar of posts to have over the course of a month, whether it be 2 months, whether it be the evergreen posts that will always work. Think of those as your stock images, your stock video that you can publish anytime and say, I'm running for this office because I believe in fiscal responsibility, personal liberty, etc. Engagement versus broadcasting is a nuance I often emphasize to folks because engagement would mean more so directly talking with the folks in your comments or taking the comments you receive in aggregate and posting a video on something like that. I've heard a lot from you on X, Y, and Z, talking to your community. Broadcasting is more so from origin, your voice when it comes to running for office. And they have different viewpoints, different perspectives on when they should be used, especially when it comes to around Election Day, because one has more of a listening tone than the other. This is also where advertising comes into play to make your message more clear and more spread out. Text-based versus short-form video, it probably takes more comment on where we are with regards to the social media landscape with TikTok, Instagram Reels, Facebook Reels, YouTube Shorts, with short-form vertical video being integral to the communications game in today's landscape for media. And so getting comfortable in front of the camera is a must in the 21st century if you're running in a large enough election. Audience refinement with advertising can get very specific in your targeting, even so much as the location, the folks who they follow, the lookalike audience that you build will be very important, so that way your message is able to be sent out to those who will be most well received by, that you've calculated from some internal metrics, and then from there you're able to make sure that your message is disseminated to those who will have the most positive reception to it. Nobody likes a big block of text. That's why I'm very proud to have only 5 or 6 bullets a slide. Nobody wants to have a large paragraph as an advertisement. Everything should be flashy and should be quick and should be concise because the attention span of the average individual today is so short. That being said, part of this is making your visuals very compelling, using your transitions properly to make sure that the content you're putting out is captivating and it's not just content rich. Telling a story and making an ask comes with this, because it goes back to your why statement. Why are you running? And then what is your call to action? Whether that's vote for me, donate to me, volunteer with me, or answer this question, or engage in a virtual town hall. Making sure that you have an engaging part side of this is incredibly important. We talked about evergreen posts when it comes to things that are more stock-based that can be posted at any time versus time-sensitive campaigns, whereas early voting starts tomorrow. Can you commit to getting 5 people that you know to vote? So all of these are the messaging dynamics when it comes to advertising that you can use to take your lookalike audiences and really send a message home in a targeted way. 531 messaging is a big umbrella for messaging development that we have at Country First Academy. And I'll look at the last bullet there. It should focus on 3 policies you care about and therefore tied to 3 relevant proposals for your passion. 3 policy failures and 3 remedies for the things that folks are already enduring. So this takes a present and past mindset and looks to apply an idea of, well, here's where we are, here's how we can get better, here's where I'd like to go, and here's how we get there. Part of this is also 3 ways your opponent obstructs this. Obviously, the campaign should generally be positive. We don't want the mudslinging that we see today. But part of this in running a campaign has to also be differentiating yourself from an opponent. And so tying these things together in one message, that's the one there, should be the focus of how you button up the way you speak to constituents and the emphasis you place on the policies that you care most about. Okay, let's talk about fundraising and budgeting. Money matters here, folks, and it's not a donation or a gift. It's important that you reflect a campaign donation as an investment in community. And the difficulty that people face when it comes to getting campaign donations is that that investment isn't going to have a YTD rate of return. It's not going to have a stock chart that you can see the immediate value of, but rather it's the confidence and character that people would be donating to when it comes to their campaign and the folks that they have elect them to office. Political donations can be awkward, especially if you're not familiar with this. A lot of people struggle with asking for money when it comes to campaign because the general public attitude and dissatisfaction with politics today doesn't necessarily allow for that dialogue to be pleasant, but it's necessary. And if I always say that if you want to change the democratic arena, you can't just buy a ticket, you got to be on the field. And so for that reason, getting over that hurdle mentally is very important. When it comes to your first base of donations, we call this your angel donor. So, I don't know how many Rolodexes there still are, but flip through your cards or flip through your contact list, and from there, you should be populating a list of your first 1,000 people that you can think of, whether it be your Facebook friends, whether it be the people you text, whether it be other folks on social media, and identifying who those people are that are the bedrock of your familiar or friend support, who might be most likely to donate to your campaign, and thinking about what might be a reasonable ask, because they'll provide the initial financial solvency for your campaign. The last point there is incredibly important because anybody can raise a lot of money, but a lot of people can equally spend it just as poorly. And making sure that your campaign isn't in debt at the end of the election and you don't have to keep raising money if your campaign is over is very important. Because if you find it difficult to raise money while you're running for office, try to think about raising money to run for office after you've lost. So that can be very difficult. Now, fortunately, if it's anything that anybody has loaned to the campaign and they're willing to write it off, that can be a workaround. But try to spend wisely and practice good financial habits in-house. So when you get to office, you can actually practice what you preach. When it comes to fundraising strategy, there has to be a couple of ways you go about this. It can be a plate at dinner. It can be a gala. It can be knocking on doors. It can be sitting at a coffee shop talking with voters and asking that they buy your next one by scanning a QR code and donating to Act Blue, Win Red, Anadot, what have you. So this is the other component to that. I mentioned small dollar, is prioritizing the recurring donation base that will allow you to carry through your campaign, through your vision, with the financial cushion to do that, whether that's your recurring costs around paying staff, sending out mailers, subscription services, et cetera. Part of this will also be fulfilled by candidate and volunteer call time. You'll be getting call list from your local election board, or you'll get call list from your wherever you purchase them from, whether they be from your party or loaded into your state software, and asking folks for money. And a lot of those voters are scored on models for the reliability as donors, the reliability to support you, and so you can make more educated assumptions about their likeliness to support you. Just make sure you dedicate some time to that volunteer and candidate call time, because that personal relationship building will also pay dividends down the line. The other thing that can sometimes help with breaking the ice here is making it clear what the money will be used for. And so I say all that because if you know you need to raise another $5,000 to send a mailer to the next 10,000 people in the ward over from you, making that pitch very clear allows voters to feel a sense of responsibility and have a part in the success of your campaign. And that's where storytelling really comes into play. Fiscal responsibility is something I've touched on, so I apologize for getting ahead of myself. but making sure that you don't overspend early and spend it on things that are poorly thought out is incredibly important because you're dealing with limited resources. And so if your budget for a city council race is $10,000 and there's somebody who wants to sell you signs for $3,000, let's think about the cost there. Let's think about if your area is very rural and your door-to-door knocking would be fairly difficult and more time intense, then maybe that's something you consider. But overall, let's make sure that we are preserving cash flow. At the bottom, I talk about some of the most common costs for the campaign. Yard signs, everybody's seen them. Palm cards, everyone's been given one. Digital and software has to deal with like your walkbook apps that you can use when you're knocking on doors and saying, I've been here, as well as the digital advertising space. That's part of your messaging. And so making sure you have a clear budget early on is very important to guarantee that your money you know where your money is going and where you'll need to fill in gaps. EDDM stands for Every Door Direct Mail. There are mail service providers, vendors that you can enlist to take care of this for you. Part of this also can be done directly through the post office if you want to really go about it your own way. And so you can expect for these to be between 65 and 75 cents a mail piece, a little bit more than a stamp because it's targeted and has to be designed. Okay, so we have two more sections, but these are shorter. Field team development, volunteer recruitment. There's 6 key points that when it comes to volunteer recruitment that we have to think about. Efficiency, retention, development, skills optimization, effort, and training. The first thing is efficiency. We need folks to be quick, and we need to make sure that they're delivering results fast because the only thing that every campaign receives in equal measure is time. When it comes to retention, we need people to come back. We need them to have a positive experience. This is where going out and buying the coffee and donuts for your staff and your volunteers is very important because politics is the business of people, so that relationship building should start at home. When it comes to leadership development, there's going to be folks who, if they enjoy this, are going to be helpful for you in your future runs for office or regionally for your party or for your friends or those who are considering running for office. So making sure to make folks feel that they have a role in the success of your campaign is fundamental. Skills optimization comes down to also comfortability levels. So there's some people who might prefer to be talking on the phone with folks more than they are knocking on doors. And so recognizing and matching where people want to serve rather than just pigeonholing them into certain responsibility roles is very important. Measuring effort, volunteers, you should be grateful for their time, but you should make sure that you're also tracking their deliverables. If you say, let's knock on 100 doors and they get to 85, great. If you say, let's knock on 100 doors and they get to 3, then let's make sure that you aren't counting on somebody for a role they're not fulfilling. Training is also important because especially when it comes to your messaging, you don't want rogue volunteers, you don't want rogue staff going out and saying the wrong thing. This is where providing scripts is very important so they can stay on message and then they don't accidentally flub on your core fundamentals of policy when you're running for office and you aren't there to be your own spokesman. Data analytics is something that I could run a whole presentation on this alone. So for what I will say is at the end of the presentation, if you go to our website and sign up, check out Lesson 10 Grassroots Game Planning. And what that will walk you through is a sample Excel sheet of a voter file. And if you got this in raw text form, how do you just take a random spreadsheet and turn it into a targeted list by 3 out of 4s, 4 to 4s, counties, cities, streets, and then organize that to create a walkbook for yourself. Now, if you're running a congressional campaign, this might be really unwieldy because you're dealing with probably like 350, 400,000 registered voters. But if you're running for city council, this is something you very feasibly could do on your own. Data points should also inform, not dictate. This is, again, still a people's business. Data is a tool. It's not the be-all, end-all. It should be a guide and your North Star for maybe some direction, but not necessary for every action. Voter files is the list of the publicly available registered voters. You can get that from your clerk. A lot of times that is free. Sometimes there's a nominal cost. The other opportunity you have is to go to something like L2, which is a national voter file compilation database that takes in all of the resources from the state and local election authorities, couples that with marketing data that they source from third-party vendors, and creates a lot of scoring metrics for this person's likely to care about the climate. This person's likely to care about democracy issues. This person we know has donated to congressional candidates in the past. This person's firmly Republican. This person's very independent. And so for that reason, there can be a lot of tools that you can have in your toolbox to approach your data game. using data in your campaign is instrumental to victory because it's also the most underused, especially at the local level. At the congressional level and truly at the state level as well, that it is firmly in place. But if you're considering a run for county or local office, you're ahead of the game because a lot of folks just consider going to their local committee meetings for their party and less so about the nitty-gritty granular details when it comes to, well, if I go to State Street, I know that there's 5 houses that has voted 4 out of 4 times, and they're all Democrat, or they're all Republican, or they're independent, and they're the folks that I need to target. Okay, get out the vote ties into our 5th and final section, then we'll open the floor to questions. Is mobilizing your voters into vote-obtaining action. This phase used to only be 1 day, but with early voting being something that is so widely used as well as mail-in voting, this has to start a lot earlier. So GOTV is not a 1-day thing. It's usually about a month-long phase. If you're in the state of Virginia, it's going to be about 45 days because early voting starts in September. So organizing your voter contact, taking all the list of outreach that you've done over the course of your campaign, organizing it in a CRM, customer services relationship manager, you might have even had experience with for your business, versus Excel. I talk about when to upgrade when it comes to the size of your election. And using email marketing, using MailChimp, using SMS and MMS marketing, sending out texts. You get SMS text for 4 to 6 cents each, and MMS text from 7 to 9 cents. It's a really good deal. And using that with your targeted list to reach people on their personal devices. Email open rates is great if you can get 20%. Text, you're looking at definitely over 50%. Now, with a lot of spam filters, sometimes your carrier will block these. They've gotten very good at that in recent years, but it's still a very effective method. The last point there, FCC and opt-in rules is important because you have to respect folks' role on the or placement on the do not call list if you're doing robocalling or if they've opted out and not messaging them again. Okay, we'll breeze through this last part. So Election Day operations is about executing on your GOTV plan in its final stages. The other data point that I'll mention is you could probably pull from your clerk how many people voted on Election Day versus early in your jurisdiction, which will inform this decision making. Poll visitation is a touchy subject because you definitely do not want to come across as intimidating in any way because that would be illegal. But there are definitely distances that you can have from polling locations to place signs and still hand out literature before folks enter the voting location. And that's usually like 100 or 200 feet from the doors. Each state has different rules on that. And team watch party is the fun side of things, but that's your opportunity to recognize your hard work that you've done over the course of the probably 2 years or 1.5 years that you've run for office, whether informally or formally, and taking the time to close the books on that. The closing of polls isn't the closing of the campaign. You're going to have finance things to take care of. Your final reports are going to be fundamental to your legal obligations. You're going to have to close probably a Q4 report in December, as well as maybe one in January. If you plan to keep the committee open, you're going to have to do that between now and the next election. Paying vendors and remedying final budgets is also part of this. There's some times where vendors might not bill you to the end of the election cycle. Make sure to pay up and you have the money saved for that. In terms of what you do if you have leftover money, you can donate it. Some states have that as an auto option. For the Secretary of State's website, it'll donate to charity. You can donate it to other candidates. You can refund it if possible. But bottom line, the last point is holistically the mission of why we're here, is unity and victory for people who voted for you, didn't vote for you, or didn't vote at all, and humility in the defeat and acknowledging the outcome of the election. When it comes to legislating and being the elected official you seek to be represented by, think about your accessibility constituents, what your like open office hours, what your constituent services will look like, and so that way you can make sure that you're embodying an engagement in the democratic process that you are here today to see more from in our politics, and you don't fall victim to the same the removal from civic life. The other thing to consider is we've partnered with Power and the Power of the Polls in the past to get folks to sign up to be election workers. If you do lose, this is an opportunity to stay engaged in the civic process and is very fundamental to your accessibility to the community should you run again. Okay, so recap on what we've done, and then we'll answer questions. So if you go to our website, countryfirstacademy.org, the word is spelled out first, but in my email, it's 1ST. The domain there's a difference in the email and in the website. So I talked about the 14 webinars, tech tools, and templates. They're publicly accessible. You have to complete the Run for Office form as well as the Lesson 1 form to receive access to those. And I'd encourage you to monitor the syllabus, which is our mapping resource for the list of all your other county elected officials as we wrap up that project in the coming weeks. So I'll leave you with our quote, and then I will open the floor to any questions. We need more folks engaged because getting the town square back in order takes the pragmatic left and the principled right to put country first and make sure that we're having the conversations that need to be had, the reasonable policy that needs to be put forth, and all-encompassing fidelity to democracy and the democratic process that more folks need to be engaged with, so that way we have a better outlook on why we're here, and that the conversations we're having in the exhibitor room is not how bad things are, but rather how from the ground up we're able to really make a difference in terms of what our local and county elected governance looks like in 26 and 28. So that way we have a bench of folks potentially for state level office in 30 and beyond. So with that, I thank you for your time, and I will I'll open the floor to questions. Yes, Nieta.
I'm already involved civically. I serve on my city's disability commission, so I'm already subject to the state ethical rules because it's technically a political appointment. So my question is, if you're already involved and you're trying to make the transition from an appointed position to an elected position, how do you do that?
Great question. So I think first part is identifying what office you seek to run for. Our city, our syllabus is going to provide an office to that. It could be hyperlocal at the city level. It can be something that's elected at the city level, like a planning board. And so I think it would just be more surveying your opportunities and finding a match for you. I have a question back there.
Does your organizations back candidates?
Good question. So we're a 501c4. We do not endorse or provide direct donations to candidates. We're a purely nonpartisan civic education nonprofit. Yep.
Yeah. I came in a little late, but listening to what you're saying, I got back to my original thought about plans for myself. And I'm a little old lady. I'm already 67. I'd probably do much better being the person who takes care of all the details, being the staff. Is your training good for learning to do that? And do you think about developing people who want to do that part?
Yeah, great question. One of the things we did in 2024 is there were a lot of folks who signed up on our website and said they were interested in running for office, or interested in getting involved in the process, not running for office, but civic or volunteer opportunities only. And so one of the things that we focused on for 2026 and beyond is what that volunteer base may look like and some of the leadership development when it comes to staff. In terms of the training, I mean, a lot of this will be applicable because this is directed towards candidates, but I could sub out candidate training for staff training, and the same would apply because the principles of how to manage a budget, what your focus should be on messaging, is something you'd have to do if you're a comms director versus if you were a candidate. So in terms of the education, maybe there could be some tailored content, but I think a lot of it still applies. In terms of the current cohort, we've done that in the past, and I hope to resume that in the future. Yeah.
Hi. I'm in my 5th year serving on the select board in my town, which is sort of small town version of city council. I'm also an independent. I'm wondering if you could comment, well, going back, the select board, it doesn't matter that I'm an independent because it's really not political.
Nonpartisan office. Yeah.
But I'm wondering if you could comment on independents running for office.
Yeah, sure thing. Well, one of the things that independents are afforded is the opportunity, if you're considering local or county office, a lot of them are structurally nonpartisan, as you said, so there's no primary. In terms of independents running for higher office, I think it's great. I think it's, a call to that there's almost a near majority of Americans who identify as independent. I think there's probably some structural hurdles that they have to overcome. Like I mentioned, you sometimes have to get double the signatures as a partisan candidate. I think in terms of the merits of an individual race, that's a case-by-case basis. But I think with the right investment of time, and we look at what could have been Senator Dan Osborne in his election in 2024, when he came rather close to beating Deb Fischer. We look at Angus King, who's a current independent senator. And so I think that the future of independence is largely contingent on careful selection of races, and that there's some that are more opportune than others, just based on numbers alone. If an R plus 70 district or a D plus 70 district, that might be tough to overcome. But if it's like R plus 15 or D plus 15, or there's one party who bows out, then there's an opportunity there. If both parties participate, then it comes with navigating a thread in the middle, but that can be done. I think that there's just no one broad brush or one size fits all that applies to that. But good question. Yeah.
For a rural campaign, do you have advice on the best or most efficient way to reach voters? Social media is big, but there's also a lot of info bubbles.
A lot of info bubbles, you said? Yeah, like partisan silos, like online, you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah, great question. Well, I mean, in terms of combating those directly, unless your Facebook groups would forbid this, I would encourage candidates to try and take part in what those local town talks may be, or if there's little partisan chatters, try to get yourself approved in those groups. In terms of the broader social media game in rural areas, that can be a way to disseminate information. The targeting of that could be a little bit more loose, but I would also say that your signs and your legacy printed materials, your billboards, is another great opportunity there, especially because if you're dealing with not row homes but a home every quarter mile, having something that is larger and that's standing on a main road, especially if you're running for a city council campaign, would probably be a better name ID awareness investment. Yeah.
I was wondering if your website includes analytical tools about things like where offices are terming out, like the current elected official is terming out in whatever period of time, and or the ability to see historically uncontested roles, things of that nature.
So in terms of the data on uncontested roles, that would be great. We do not have that. I think that's also very variable per election cycle. I've seen a couple of county offices in my research in the Midwest, like in Illinois, for example, I think it was in Tazewell County. They didn't get a full slate of elected officials to run for county board. And so there's going to be two offices that are writing campaigns. That's so election to election that I think would be difficult to judge. In terms of what elected officials are up for election that year, the syllabus has this. So when you enter in your address and you click and you see who your elected officials are, part of that will be the next year that they're up for re-election. And it looks like we have time for one, maybe two more questions.
Okay. You mentioned that the Country First Academy was only a educational thing with no support. What about the Country First writ large? Are there people that the Country First organization supports out loud?
Yeah, so in terms of institutional support, the Academy doesn't broadcast to the public who the candidates are that have come through our system. In terms of the Country First orbit, some of the work that they've done has been more action focused, but in terms of the direct ties that the Academy and Legacy Country First has, that's work that, because we're separate entities, there has to be some bit of a wall in between, there's just legal obligations around that. But in terms of support, whether financial or amplification-wise, that's entirely contingent upon them. And I wouldn't be directly involved in that for IRS reasons. Yeah.
Yes, can you talk a little bit about polling, particularly in smaller campaigns where you can't go to spend a lot of money on the high-dollar professional firms?
Yeah, sure thing. So polling, when it comes to local campaigns, you might actually find rather successful returns on texting. Because if you have a curated list, let's say you say, well, I want to model 1,000 registered voters in my district, and I know that there's 37% Democrat and 37% Republican and 26% Independent. I mean, well, the first thing I would think of, if I'm expecting a 20% return rate, then I would send a text out to, 10,000, or excuse me, 5,000 individuals at 10 cents a text, called a $500 survey that is modeled to the voter list, and then once that comes in on the returns, I would weight that accordingly. So I think you can run your own polls. It can be somewhat expensive. The returns can be, in terms of people who actually answer the question, rather low because people get spam texts all the time. But if you're running on a thinner budget and can't hire a firm, that would be my way to do it. All right, looks like we have time for one more question, and then I'll turn it over to the principals for staff. Oh, yeah, in the back there.
Well, I'm looking forward to it, because at some point, whether there or other, I'd like to find out what...
Yeah, I'm sure there is. In terms of conversion rates on mailers, the data would be escaping me now, but I do know that some of the reports that have come out from APOR, American Association of Political Research, has been that it has decreased, partly especially with the younger generation who doesn't check their mail as often, and so sometimes it's not as timely received. Also, as soon as people get mail, because we get so much junk mail now, it's tossed out as soon as you receive it. So I think its influence has declined, which is why the advertising that we often encourage is that of digital in nature, especially in highly densely populated areas where EDDM would be expensive. That's your mailers again. And so it's definitely effective. It's been declining and such, but it's still a valuable tool. And it looks like I'm going to yield 22 seconds back. So Greg did rather well. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate it.